Hey, Monsies!
Hey, Mussies. Yeah, so really quick, part two, some thoughts that we left out on our first go round. You said that you noticed, this is all spoiler, by the way, still. You said you noticed issues with scaling.
I noticed it mostly with Godzilla, yeah, because he spent a lot of time upstairs, like on the real world. And there were cool scenes where he was like sleeping in the Coliseum. I think they kind of tried to humanize and make him seem cute. And then other times he was sort of like, then again, as tall as like skyscrapers. I don't know how tall the Coliseum is. That might be accurate, but it seemed like his size did change. It seemed like he was smaller for the Coliseum and then larger for skyscrapers. Any of you fans out there can fact check us. Maybe the Coliseum is as wide as a skyscraper. Any thoughts you had? Any things you noticed?
Well, when you're talking about the Coliseum, I kept noticing like he kept climbing into the Coliseum without damaging it at all, and so he's just sleeping in there. But when he got out that one time, he did kind of like drag his foot across it and break it a little bit. But I just felt like Godzilla himself is supposed to be kind of reckless, just like
He was
moving,
like wrecking everything the rest of the movie. So
yeah, like I feel like he should just like bust it through one of the walls, then lay down. But no, it's like he carefully tiptoed over. They didn't show that happening, but he was just always like perfectly in there, and it was a little bit too perfect in my opinion. But the scaling issues. There was a confusing moment whenever Kong first shows up in Egypt. He turns and starts like roaring off in a direction, and then Godzilla's on top of like a cliff roaring back at him. I thought, wait, why is there a giant like oceanside cliff right in the middle of Egypt, like near the pyramids? And then I realized, oh no, it's just Godzilla's in an entirely different part of the world. It's just spliced together to look like they're roaring at each other when they're not really there. That was confusing. I feel like that
I think they still were trying to like yell at each other and get each other's attention though. I
from
think that
the other
was
side of the
intent.
planet. I mean, I know in Godzilla versus Kong, Godzilla roared down into the hole to call Kong up,
Right.
but that was like a direct tunnel, like emphasizing this. They're on the other side of a round globe, and they're just yelling at each other somehow.
Well, I thought we established this was a flat Earth with a hollow Earth
Oh
in it.
yeah, I was joking about
No,
that
but
part
seriously, I think it showed at the beginning of that scene, the one with Godzilla, that he was in Gibraltar, which is like just to the north of Africa. Now, to be fair, Egypt's all the way in the east side, and Gibraltar would be all the way in the west. So it is still incredibly far, but it's not as far as like the other side of the Earth. So
We're talking like at least 1,000 miles apart from each other.
Africa's pretty big, so I would guess, yeah. It's like from Turkey to Spain.
Yeah,
Can you
yeah.
imagine that distance a little bit better?
Yeah, definitely thousands.
Yes,
miles,
thousands of
probably
miles.
Plural, yeah.
It seems unlikely, but I mean, these are two Titan creatures who use their roars to challenge each other. I mean,
Right.
Godzilla was being challenged by monsters in the past. They apparently have really good hearing and they're really loud.
But to bring it back to the point that we had about the scaling issue is when Godzilla's on top of that cliff, he then dives off in like a comedic. Was it supposed to be comedy or was it just supposed to be awesome? Because it was kind of comical.
I think it was just supposed to be like that action sequence where somebody dives into action, like right into the
But
water.
because
and
it's
swims
Godzilla,
off.
it comes out comical. It's just.
Right, because it's not a man in a rubber suit. It looked kind of strange.
But for the scaling factor, when he dives off and he lands like really shallow in the ocean, like he goes completely deep under the water just fine. But my mind was thinking, I feel like he should have just like dived, and since the shadow just like splat and just right on the sand.
His like legs are just like wriggling like in the water.
Yes, I was like, how does the ocean drop off that deep that fast? Maybe it does. I could be wrong, but it just didn't feel right to my eyes when I saw that happen.
Yeah, it did look a little bit strange. I agree. It just seemed out of character. Do you really see him diving from that distance ever? Not in the water, I feel.
I've never seen Godzilla. What?
Maybe like if
Well,
he's just
no,
right beside the
no,
water, he'll
yeah.
like dive into it, but not like from
I've
like
seen-
a diving board. You know?
In the old 60s films, Godzilla did like cannonball a couple times into the water.
He also flew, but yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. But yeah. You said you noticed a huge difference between this movie and the previous MonsterVerse films.
Yeah, there was a lot less like Army Navy influence. Like you saw some like in the European theater a little bit from the Italians, a little bit from France, but like throughout all the previous ones, was it been 3 movies now? Even the Kong movie, you constantly saw military involvement. You had like carriers, battleships, destroyers, submarines. Now there were some submarines in this one, but the
I
response
saw
from
one
the military
submarine,
was really muted.
and then I saw a bunch of fighter jets when
True.
Godzilla wasn't. Godzilla didn't even go to the United States this time. I don't think, did he? No, he was just touring the world, and there was other countries fighter jets attacking him. But yeah, the U.S. military seemed to have like no presence at all in this movie.
Right,
And
even in the ones that are in Japan, he would have a presence.
Right.
And in this one, like
Right.
they kind of took the sideline.
And it's actually a fact though that like in Hollywood movies, if the U.S. military will let you use like whatever they want, like if you want to use their tanks as like a model or just as a background thing, you can do that. However, if you cooperate with the military, then you have to get their approval, so that way you're not like slandering them or pushing some kind of anti-propaganda that they don't like. And so I did notice, like, yeah, there was no U.S. military in this film, and it's not like they had a message to go against the U.S. military in this, but that seems like because they didn't have a cooperating message with the military here, that they relied on having a team of scientists that we followed rather than the military.
Yeah, it was like
So-
Monarch as like a corporation, which was huge. Who
Yeah.
didn't need the military. Although there was that threat they kept mentioning as Monarch that the government wanted to take them over. It was like some threat they kept lingering on. So I wonder if that was like real world stuff that was leaking into it or not. But it was sort of a look into how the story was different as like corporations instead of like militaries fighting them.
Yeah, I just think that it's there must be some kind of correlation there, not having a military in there, and then also just choosing to follow scientists rather than any military main characters.
That's true. Yeah, there was like, even in the past you had like the military characters were the main characters. But
How'd you feel about the CGI?
I thought it was mostly good at times. Sometimes it's hard to explain it, but it looked like, you ever watch like an old claymation film where you could tell it's claymation because when the character's moving a certain way, there's kind of like a blockiness to it. It was like, oh, I'm like missing a frame.
Yes.
There were a couple of times where it happened. It seemed to happen to Kong, and I can only remember like 2 times to be honest. But there were other times where it was a little bit sketchy, but overall I thought it was fine.
I was telling you, I think I noticed like in the very beginning whenever he was having that chase with that pack of wolf kaiju.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, he was running and then he jumped across, and it seemed like there was almost like a couple frames of animation missing. He went from running to like jumping position without transitioning.
Right.
But I do have a theory here that like maybe because I don't know what the budget for this film was. I should probably look that up, but I think
It says
Godzilla.
here it was $7.
I think because, well, I mean, there was the new Godzilla model for the Godzilla Evolved,
They did
but
change
the
it.
previous Godzilla model and the Kong model were from like other movies, and so that was already taken care of. So I feel like maybe those films had a bigger budget at the time, or maybe that was what they prioritized with those films with that budget, and so the model was better. And then with this movie with so much more action, the new kaiju had a smaller budget, and so they didn't match Godzilla and Kong's animations as much. I don't know.
That's a good theory. Yeah.
Because that baby Kong, he looked very cartoonish compared to Kong and Godzilla.
Right. My only theory to that is I think he's just there for the kids to push merchandise. That's the one that they're going to set out. They're going to remember. It's the big-eyed, cute little monster they're going to buy and want their mom and dads to buy a picture of it.
Yeah. So really quick, you were saying before we went into this movie about humor. A lot of it was being pushed on humans, and I was predicting it'd be a little bit more for the kaiju. It seemed like humans definitely tried to do a lot of the humor.
Sure.
Some of it was intentionally for the kaiju doing the humor also, but sometimes it was just kind of laughable what the kaiju were doing. And so there was all kinds of humor. There was human humor, kaiju humor, and unintentional kaiju humor. And what did you think of the humor overall?
I thought the human humor mostly missed the mark. There were certainly moments like with the helicopter and the dentist I thought was funny.
Oh,
it
my
wasn't
goodness.
necessary to the plot, but it was sort of amusing.
Oh, I mean, I laugh at that, but it
but
was
then, like,
completely cringe laughing. The whole dentist helicopter scene. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of like a shocking moment. It wouldn't be funny the second time, but the first time it was kind of like,
It's going to be
this is
annoying
kind of
the second
amusing.
time.
Right.
It's going to
That's
be
true.
annoying. Yes.
But like the conspiracy theorist guy, the guy with the podcast, he was just he was the butt of jokes. Like his humor was that he was pathetic.
Yeah.
A lot of times, or really nerdy. So he's kind of a punching bag. That's how they designed his character. And I don't remember any other humans being funny or trying to be funny. Do you? The other human characters that were recurring.
You
was,
said
like,
you said Ace Ventura and the conspiracy theorist guy are the two
the pilot was
comedians.
kind of being like a tough guy, humor guy,
Oh,
But
I
then
didn't pick up on any of his humor at all. I just found him annoying. I kept thinking, I can't wait for this guy to die, and he did. I was like, I literally applauded during the theater when that happened. I was like, thank goodness he's gone.
okay,
He
see,
got eaten by the tree.
he did get eaten by the tree. I kind of saw him as keeping the other characters bottled up a little bit.
I didn't
Because once
even-
he was dead, then
Yeah.
the two guys just did their.
Well, speaking of the CGI, I don't know if it was the model or what, but I didn't even realize that was a tree until after they said he got ate by a tree. I was like, oh, that was a tree? I thought we were just looking at the back of a kaiju. We didn't see what the rest of it was.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. It looked like a bush or something. They never really gave you a close look at it, and it was never sort of foreshadowed it was about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So they just told us it was a tree. So I believe them. What am I gonna do?
In part one of our review, you mentioned about how there's an inconsistency in the portals and how the whole system works, about how gravity is and everything. You were just pointing out to me before we made this part 2 video here that it's weird that like on one side of the hollow earth, the portals are always open, but up on land they're not always open.
Mm.
And so the kaiju can come flying through there, but then they'll come climbing out of the other end, even though gravity works both ways. But
Oh, yeah. I
but
didn't realize that.
what activates them though? Like how do they know up above to open up whenever something's coming through versus?
So I think my theory is the director says they name the scene and then they hit the clappy thing,
Yeah.
and then the portal opens, the water drains out, and then the monster climbs out of it after the CGI person renders it. But no, seriousness, I don't know if there are any rules. I think just whatever was convenient at the time. I think they had to have some rules though, because obviously like that one that was underwater would just drain the whole time. The ocean would be empty in a couple hundred years.
And the hollow earth will be full of water.
Would be like really damp. So yeah, I don't know. I could see maybe the one on the inside being always active because those people were like the guardians.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it was always active for them, and it took them to the places they maybe historically went.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as upside, I don't know. Maybe they had to let him in. I don't really know. I think maybe it's a plot hole.
So what I think what I was trying to elaborate with earlier is that, like I said, I was expecting the MonsterVerse to be cheesy, and it was still beyond what I was expecting. And that's kind of what that hints at what's kind of bugging me, is because I feel like Godzilla is meaningless in this. Like, sure, they say about, like, in the other MonsterVerse movies that, you know, he's a force of nature, he brings balance and everything like that. He's kind of just here fighting other monsters. There's no really any symbolic meaning to him. And Godzilla is, like, without a purpose or creator in these Hollywood films. And when you mix that on top of all, like, the human scenes that are completely out of tone and out of touch with Godzilla in this movie and what Godzilla is supposed to be, this metaphorically kind of, or symbolically, reminds me of the 1954 and 1956 versions of the original Godzilla film, where they added Raymond Burr into those scenes to make it more Americanized. Now, I know this is all what Hollywood intended with this movie, but when you see Godzilla, he's doing his own things, and the humans come in cracking their joke, doing their own thing, and Godzilla doesn't even have purpose. It's like Godzilla with without the character of Godzilla, kind of. It feels like two different movies spliced together. It doesn't quite fit. And I feel like there's a Godzilla movie in Godzilla and Kong, but it's watered down with so much other tone and character writing that it feels like Frankenstein's monster. Like, it's just two films stitched together, and it doesn't quite fit.
Yeah, I agree with you. Godzilla just kind of goes around fighting monster and monster getting more powerful for a battle that I'm not sure how he understands it's about to happen. Well, his character did seem to change, because before he was just fighting stuff just because that's what he did. He was an apex predator. Maybe at this point it's just no one knows how to write him in America, because he's not an American character. We don't really have sea monsters in the same way. We might have maybe like Moby Dick or something, but we don't have like a dinosaur that lives in the water that was activated because of a traumatic event that happened to our country. You know, obviously the Hiroshima bombings, etc. So we don't really have that cultural connection to Godzilla. It's just sort of an import.
But I feel like the United States has been through so many controversies and stuff with our wars and everything like that. There is a metaphor to be put in there somewhere about, like, our actions coming back to bite us and stuff like that. I mean, that's just my opinion, but
That could be true, but I don't know if American culture really takes that. We're We're only the victim for a little bit, but we're usually the hero.
Okay, but I mean,
We don't make mistakes.
but we don't really even get to see Godzilla in America. Like in the 2014 movie, he was in California, and
Yeah, San Francisco. Right?
Yeah, for like the grand finale and
In Las Vegas.
in Hawaii,
And Las Vegas.
and Las Vegas and Hawaii. Yeah.
Yeah, and everyone in between.
Well, so there was that, and then in the 2019 film, he was briefly in Washington D.C., I believe, or maybe it wasn't even him. Maybe it was just King Ghidorah. But the point is that they showed like Washington D.C. being flooded, and then there was like ships going down like the streets. But that was pretty much it. This film doesn't even touch the United States. Godzilla has yet to make it to New York in any of these movies. I feel like that's what most people really want, is just to see Godzilla wrecking New York at some point. But they kind of stay away from that because they don't know how to place Godzilla in the United States, or if they do show some kind of disaster happening, it's just briefly alluded to in a scene of like DC flooding, and then it just cuts to something else somewhere else. There's no actual like weight to Godzilla reckoning or facing. But like,
I'm curious, is maybe New York off limits since September 11th, though?
no, I mean they've maybe Warner Brothers feels that way or
That's
something
what I mean.
like that.
Maybe the publishing company doesn't feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, because I mean,
I'm trying to create an answer to the question.
Well,
It might not be
I
the
get it.
answer.
I know, because like Paramount had no problem doing that with. There was controversy back in 2008 with Cloverfield wrecking New York, but
Oh yeah, I mean they even ripped out the head of the Statue of Liberty. So yeah, I guess that was pretty.
yeah,
But that kind of was a darker movie in a lot of ways. But I see what you're saying. Yeah.
but I mean, even if you
parallel.
look at it from like a political perspective, like both parties are kind of fed up with the direction that the United States is heading in. It doesn't even matter who's the president right now. It's been like this for a long time, and so I feel like the audience would be completely receptive to said corruption, because I think a lot of people agree that corruption's on both sides. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I think there's a doorway open for the audience to receive Godzilla as the United States fate, metaphorically speaking, and still sell tickets.
Perhaps.
I mean, what was like the city of New York gonna sue Warner Brothers for wrecking it in a movie?
No, I mean nothing happened after San Francisco, I assume. So that's a good question.
All right, yeah.
I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah. I mean, if you have an answer in the comments or what your theories are about why these movies turn out certain ways, let me know in the comments below. But that was just some leftover thoughts I had there.
Sounds good.
All right.
Have a good one.
Thanks.